There's some commotion about Starbucks, ladies and gentlemen, that even caught me off guard. Because usually when you hear, Starbucks trending in the news, it's usually either a scandal that broke out, like the one where two black guys walked in, they were kicked out because one of them was trying to use the washroom, and racial profiling and whatnot, or they're coming out with a ridiculously stupid drink. And people already knew my take of Starbucks. People already know, my personal beef with them. I'm not discriminating people that go there, but it's just not my forte to, pay $10 for coffee that's just not that great. But this really did surprise me, and really kind of shocking too. ABC 7 News says Starbucks said Thursday it's closing hundreds of stores in the US, Canada, and Europe, and laying off 900 non-retail employees so it can focus resources on its turnaround plan. So, Starbucks is closing a lot of these stores across North America and Europe. I didn't think it would come down to this. And we know that there's been boycott pressures with BDS, but I honestly didn't think this was going to happen, because I know a lot of people that still go to Starbucks no matter what. It's like a ritual that they do every morning, that they pay $10 for whatever latte, soy milk, whatever case may be. But here's what they're saying here. So, Starbucks to close over 400 stores, lay off 900 workers as part of the turnaround plan. Turn this down. The company expects to end its fiscal year this Sunday with 434 fewer stores in North America than it had at the end of June. Starbucks CEO Brian Niccol said company is closing stores that don't have a path to financial stability, or physical spaces that don't meet customers' expectations. Starbucks Workers United, the labor group organizing workers, said Thursday that the closures were made without input from Starbucks baristas. This is the second round of layoffs at Starbucks this year. In February, Niccol announced the layoffs of 1,100 corporate employees globally and eliminate several hundred open positions. Starbucks shares fell 1% Thursday, of course, after this announcement. So that's pretty interesting. Like I said, I was a bit shocked with this, because I never thought that, like, Starbucks of all places. But you have to look at the circumstances of all this. You had the BDS movement boycotting certain brands that either pledge support or have financial ties or business acquisition to what Israel's doing. So people are investigating. They're calling for boycotts to not support, Israel through these certain brands. There's that factor into this. But there's also the argument, I think this is, necessary to mention, is at this time, at this moment, when, so many of our daily life, so much of just the average cost of living is farther than ever of reach for many people. We have homelessness epidemics. We have people that can't afford, basic groceries and the basic necessities for life. There's a lot of people that are struggling to make ends meet. It doesn't seem like a good business market to promote these, special lattes and coffee drinks that are to the tune of, not simply a few bucks, but can end up, $8, $9, $10 per cup to get these specialty drinks that no one can really afford because the burden of just basic necessities is already enough for people. So people are scaling back on a lot of these, luxury products, if you will. And I know it seems crazy to think that, a coffee is a luxury drink, but in the case of Starbucks, you have to look at your priorities, like what's more important, making sure you have nutrition and you survive another day, or going and standing in line to get a soy latte. Like you have to look at that in that scale. So this article came out. This is from Now, where it says, I was in complete shock. Starbucks just axed hundreds of jobs. Workers say they never saw it coming. So here's the CEO, the Howard Schultz. Today in an internal meeting, CEO Howard Schultz said, Starbucks is a window into America. We are facing things in which the stores were not built for. We're listening to our people and closing stores, and this is just the beginning. They are going to be many more. So this is Howard Schultz, as the Starbucks brand and reputation was starting to go downhill, primarily with its connection to Israel. But we're going to explore how exactly it's connected to Israel, and if it is, we're going to dive into that later on. But here's the CEO that's been already under scrutiny, that the Starbucks chain is already being, under a spotlight. They've had scandal after scandal. I mentioned about, racial discrimination and profiling. They've also been very, anti-union. They've been very, busting workers that are forming organizations to unionize. They're going after them and demonizing. And now here's the CEO making a statement about how it's restructuring Starbucks because the brand is deteriorating. Watch this.
I don't have to spend too much time on what's going on in the country and how America has become unsafe. But you all read the press release over the last couple of days about the fact that we are beginning to close stores that are not unprofitable. But we're closing stores as a result of the co-creation sessions that we've had. Almost 60 now, 25 in the SSC and the rest in the field. And we had one yesterday in San Antonio. But in all of those sessions, it has shocked me that one of the primary concerns that our retail partners have is their own personal safety. And then we heard the stories that go along with it about what happens in our bathrooms. The issue of mental illness, the issues of homelessness, and the issues of crime. And Starbucks is a window into America. We have stores in every community, and we are facing things in which the stores were not built for. And so we're listening to our people and closing stores, and this is just the beginning. There are going to be many more.
So that was Howard Schultz. Also talking about crime being a possibility on why more of these stores are closing down, because a lot of, big areas, you take, the large cities of New York and Los Angeles and San Francisco and Chicago and elsewhere across the country in America, there are a lot of stores in areas that are very, very prone to high criminal activity, that the employees don't feel safe, that the customers don't feel safe. They mentioned about how bathrooms at these locations, mental illness, that people are abusing, and you have homeless people and drug addicts that are, using their facilities to do whatever. So that's a possibility onto why exactly Starbucks is closing down. Like, there's many different instances of why this is all happening. And that's why I'm having this conversation and why I'm bringing this to details, because it may not be exactly just, BDS movement as a result of this, or just, the economy's bad and no one wants to buy, fancy drinks. Because he even just said, like, a lot of these stores are profitable, but they're even being shut down because just how unsafe things are, and how customers don't feel they can go to these Starbucks locations and feel in a safe environment knowing that this is happening more frequently. So that's another thing to add to the conversation here. So here, Starbucks in my region is becoming irrelevant by the rapidly growing Zus coffee. This is from Farron's. Boycotts work so long as people have the conviction to seek alternatives and support them, while the same alternatives know how to ride the momentum to push BDS targets down to irrelevance. So what this person's saying is that people that are boycotting Starbucks because the Israel-Palestine conflict and how a lot of these brands, not just Starbucks, but McDonald's, Pizza Hut, Burger King, things on there, many other big chain stores and companies that are pursuing business motivations with Israel that inevitably, fund the genocide, people are protesting against, they're finding alternatives. And this person's mentioning about this chain called Zeus Coffee. And it's, underneath it says Zeus Coffee was one of the several Malaysian coffee chains experiencing a surge in patronage following the worldwide boycott on Starbucks in response to its lawsuit towards the Starbucks Workers United Union following the latter's social media communications on the 10th of October 2023, expressing solidarity with Gazan civilians affected by war waged by the Israeli army 3 days before. So the workers union representing Starbucks employees expressed concerns about the genocide. And Starbucks, the company, went after that union. They went after the workers. They went after people that expressed concerns about the genocide, that were united in solidarity with the Gazan civilians being affected. And because Starbucks has business tensions with Israel, business connections with in the IDF and whatnot, people saw this and are boycotting this chain, much like any other, in partnership, being against the Gaza genocide, and are looking for alternatives like this Zeus Coffee. And that's another thing that could potentially bring Starbucks down. So you have the BDS, you have the scandals just internally within Starbucks, the crackdown on unions, the racial profiling that kind of tarnished that brand. You also have the economy factor that people just can't afford, fancy coffee drinks at a time like this that people are scaling back. We now got to think about priorities when it comes to business models. Like, you see a lot of these, even like department stores are starting to close down because a lot of people can't go out and shop for, frivolous items that they used to do back in the day. That now a lot of people are concerned in budgeting and they're looking towards cheaper alternatives. They look at Temu, they look at Amazon, they look at elsewhere that they can find an alternative that is cheaper and more affordable in their rate, as opposed to going out and doing, shopping at department stores and luxury brands and looking for name brand materials. So that's another factor to this. But supposedly Starbucks isn't directly involved with Israel. That's according to this. So Luna Fixer Redu says Starbucks is not on the BDS list and has no stores in Israel and sends aid to Gaza via the World Central Kitchen. Maybe focus on not using HP printers and Intel chips that are actually on the BDS list instead of doing the easiest thing of not buying Starbucks for made-up reasons. And they're taking this as part of their argument here. So I don't know exactly who wrote this, but it says, as a result of ongoing conversations, the Starbucks Foundation and Al-Shaya Starbucks committed to providing the equivalent of 1 million meals to people in need in Gaza through a joint donation of $3 million to World Central Kitchen in March, to expand our support for the region. Al Shaya Group and Starbucks EMEA has launched a partner employee donation matching initiative aimed at raising additional foods for food aid in Gaza through World Central Kitchen. We agree with World Central Kitchen's team and their families around the world as the organization takes the time to reevaluate when its operations will resume in the region. Our commitment remains unwavering. So that's in relation to the Israeli attack on World Central Kitchen. We will continue to stay close to World Central Kitchen to ensure that they have the resources for the humanitarian mission to proceed. So, again, I can't confirm or deny the veracity of this statement, but what they're saying here, what this person's saying here, is that they're claiming that Starbucks donates to the World Central Kitchen, that they're sending food to Gaza, that they're actually aiding and assisting Palestinian people. Which, if that's the case, why would then Starbucks go and demonize unions and employees that are showing solidarity for the Gazan people? Why would you then demonize them if you're assisting in humanitarian aid? So that's the conflicting part of this. Like I said, I can't confirm the veracity of the statement that was presented there, but that's what's being claimed, is they spend millions of dollars funding and feeding people through the World Central Kitchen. That's what they're claiming. But again, why would you then demonize employees and the union that makes statements about being in solidarity with Palestinian suffrage during the horrific genocide? Why would you go and demonize that if you're supportive of feeding the people? It just doesn't make sense. So here's More Perfect Union stating, breaking, Starbucks just announced a $1 billion restructuring and will close 59 unionized stores, nearly 10% of union locations. It includes the Roastery in Seattle, one of its busiest shops. The CEO, so Howard Schultz was the former CEO. This CEO now, Brian Niccol, made $100 million in 4 months last year. So it seems like Starbucks is not, they're not financially being screwed. Like I said, I find it really shocking that they're making this announcement, that they're shutting down all these stores, that, you know, they're making the woes about how Starbucks is losing money. It doesn't seem like that. The guy, the CEO, just made $100 million in the last 4 months. Now, that may be less than maybe previously what he made, but it doesn't seem like they're in financial scrutiny. It doesn't seem like the point that they're shutting down all these locations. And here's More Perfect Union again, a statement from the workers union, so Starbucks workers union. They said, in part, fixing what's broken at Starbucks isn't possible without centering the people who engage with the company's customers day in and day out. Starbucks is taking a big game about cost cutting, but at the same time paid Brian Niccol $98 million last year. So he made $100 million in 4 months, but $98 million overall last year, and spent over $80 million on a glitzy managers-only conference in Las Vegas this June. So, again, this is why I find this so mysterious, is that while people are stating that this is in part with the boycott, divest, and sanctions movement, that people are purposely, avoiding Starbucks to look for alternatives. And while it was shocking to me that Starbucks was closing down all these stores and making all these statements, again, there's a lot of different assumptions on why. I mentioned about, BDS being one of the examples. I mentioned Howard Schultz even mentioned about crime. So there's another mention about that. I also stated that state of the economy, like no one's going to buy and purchase a fancy coffee drink if they can't afford basic necessities. Like that's just human behavior. You got to think about your priorities. It's that hierarchy of needs. But it seems like Starbucks is not losing money. It seems like the corporate side of things, they're actually gaining more revenue. So it really does not make sense to me, this announcement of shutting down all these stores and restructuring everything, when you have the CEO, you have people in the higher ups that are getting this, multi-million-dollar payout over last year at a time when people were at the highest for boycotting Starbucks. And apparently Starbucks is not directly related to Israel, but that's up for, debate and further investigation. So what exactly is the intent of why they're closing down all these stores? We don't really know for sure. And all I can really say about this is I don't feel, bad for Starbucks. I'm not going to boo-hoo, a Starbucks store is closing down. I'm not going to feel bad for the company. I have some, sympathy for the employees that now just lost their jobs, that who knows if they're going to return back or what their next steps are. And considering a time where we're losing a lot of the workforce, where a lot of jobs are being displaced. So I feel bad for them, but I don't feel bad for Starbucks. I don't feel bad for this large chain corporation that clearly is still making revenue. I'm not going to feel sad and feel lost that they're shutting down all these stores. So that's my take of it. I've already stated my personal, confliction with Starbucks, but that's just my forte of that. It's just rather shocking and interesting. But I guess more will come out of this, and we'll see, if it's just a restructuring, or is, they actually closing down stores for good. We'll have to wait and see.